Welcome back to the 2023 verdict state elections. Our continuing coverage of the general elections. Well, yes, you've seen some other states, additional state results have been declared, but there are others that have not been. But we have equally witnessed some developments that we'll get perspectives on from our guests who are here with us in the studio. So let's just get right to it. So we do have James Ugochukwu, who is the co-convener, Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room, as well as Dr. Hussaini Abdul, chairman of the board of YAGA Africa, Analysts, Election Results Analysis Board. Gentlemen, good evening, and thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Let me start with you, Mr. Ugochukwu. What's your impression of what you've seen about these elections lately?
Well, the election, as it is it didn't go the way we planned it. But you look at it from both sides, there are both negatives and positives you can take away from it. So it's not a complete disaster the way it's supposed to be if you look at it critically. And for me, the takeaway from this election is the political consciousness and people's power that is rising in this election across board. So that even despite the old threat that were posed to the people in terms of trying to force them to vote in a particular way or prevent them from voting, people still came out to vote, and people still stand strong to protect their vote and all that. Then look at the other side of it, which is election administration and all that. We cannot actually say, let us situate the blame entirely on the Independent National Electoral Commission, which is INEC. They have their own blame, but at the same time, if you look at the whole election value chain, the whole stakeholders and all that, you see there are a lot of things that happen that you cannot directly blame it on INEC. So for me, the election has come and gone. We've spent human, material, and financial resources. And I think it's high time we take audit of what happened and see how we can start correcting it ahead of 2027 election. And the right time to do it is now, because we can't afford to have this kind of election again in 2027. We should be making progress.
Dr. Hussaini, how would you describe it?
Well, I think it's a mixed bag of issues. One, it is not independent of what happened in the presidential election. So Nigerians went into these elections with that feeling of some of the happenings or what happened during the presidential elections, particularly two things. One was the logistic challenges that was experienced during the elections, and second was the failure of the INEC, the result portal, what we call the IRF. Those are the two major defining factors of the presidential election. So coming into the gubernatorial election, there was that feeling around what will happen with people's mandate to be protected. Would the logistics work? Yes, it did work, better than what we had in the presidential elections. Did the IRF work? Yes, it did work, better than, actually far, far, far better than what we had in the presidential elections. But is that enough? No. And this time around, not simply because of INEC's failure, but more because of the attitude of our politicians, the desperations to win, the use of unconventional method to suppress vote and ensure that maybe areas where they are disadvantaged, vote in those places are cancelled, or a deliberate attempt to declare an election inconclusive, so you can deliberately inflate vote in certain polling units, or you cause chaos so that the cancelled vote will be more than the winning gap, so that INEC can declare it inconclusive. These are unconventional means by politicians to do that. Nigeria is already stretched in terms of security. Violent conflicts is everywhere, and the security agencies are actually overwhelmed by some of the situations we've seen in some parts of the country.
Why do you think logistics worked this time and it didn't for the presidential elections?
I don't know. Part probably would be that there was a significant learning from what happened in the presidential elections and saying we need to do things, we need to do this better. First, in that regard, was they used the road transport workers. Of course, INEC does not have
as they always do.
As they always do, and the attitude, the kinds of commitment you get from that sociological setting of road transport motor park. It's not tight. That's one major thing. payment systems, the request for immediate down payment, cash, and all that. And then some of the underhand dealings of some electoral officers, even at the state level, who actually try to gain from that process. I think the INEC read the Riot Act, and we're all aware there was that conversation with the Rex, and had a clear discussions and decided to say we are going to hold some people responsible or accountable if this happens. I think there's been an improvement. Is it sustainable? No. It is not sustainable. And my position on INEC's logistics is that you have to unbundle INEC and unbundle its logistics system. There is no reason why logistics processes should be managed from the headquarters. So states have to take responsibility.
How do we insulate it from all of this interference that we see with our institutions here?
Yeah, interferences. I actually think that there are interferences, but not to the level that somebody has forced INEC to act in a particular manner. But my sense is that politicians have been terribly desperate in this regard and have decided to use any means possible to get through. Some succeeded in, look, violence in Kano, for instance, and the desperate attempt to make things. We saw law enforcement agencies making very, very good arrests, including senior government officials. You understand? So we can't take...
That's what the presidential election...
No, even for the gubernatorial elections.
Okay.
Even for the gubernatorial election, there were arrests, talks, and all those things. Yes, it escalated into violence even after the result was announced. But that's what you see. What is going on in Zamfara, for instance, a lot of information coming up. What happened in Lagos, even for the gubernatorial elections. These are key things. The system is weak. The structure of our society is weak. And you cannot have an election that is better than your society. To be very honest, that's my worry.
Dr. Abdul, the system is weak. And you can't have an election that's better than your society, as you say. And that means the society is weak as well.
Yes.
But this thing you talked about arrests that were made of some high-level government officials. But after the event, now we're done, elections are done.
Yes.
Results are coming out. What will happen to those people that have been arrested? This is not the first time that they've been arrested. Yes. This is not the first time that I've had people, we have laws that say do not incite violence. I mean, the police, we've had police arresting people for inciting, for something disturbing the peace. But then, after the elections, what happens? Because we've talked about this, deterring this kind, so that we don't have a recurrence. Because 4 years ago, these were some of the things that happened. We are here now, and it's happening. 2027, what's the guarantee? So let's look at the process of how to get ourselves out of this weak state of society that you talked about. Maybe we should come back to you, sir.
I think the challenge we have here is some strong men manipulating weak institutions. Yes, because these arrests will be made, the mastermind, the perpetrators, all of them are well known. Investigation would start, and midway will say, drop that case. Or the whole thing will be dragging on end in the court at the end of the day. So this sort of embolden both the perpetrators and the mastermind to do it, because after all they can do it and get away from with it. What is the case in point is that of some of the violence in Lagos State, for instance. Now you see where police were watching people coming to snatch ballot boxes and get away with it. They will come there, destroy ballot papers and get away with it. And this is a security architecture that will have armed policemen and military manning entrance to most of these polling units. They will now have those ones within the polling unit that are supposed not to carry arms within the 300 perimeters. And the question you're asking yourself is, how did this talk penetrate through all those military checkpoints, get to the polling unit, cause their destruction and disappear into thin air? And that's what nosedive to people now resorting to self-help. You saw where they linked some of the thugs and killed some of them, and gave them some serious injuries. So it's a situation that is worrisome, because you see people now being pursued and killed like rodents in the street of Nigeria. So the whole thing it boils down to us strengthening our institution and putting these strong men in check, because they are the ones that are really causing all these things. So you saw a situation in Bauchi State where they had, and I mean, the money all of us are looking for, brand new 500 notes, somebody is sharing it, and you have 2 policemen protecting the person. So the question you ask yourself is that the policemen, who are they taking order from? Is it the IGP of some powerful men that are giving them orders to do that? So, and all these things in terms of violence, in terms of vote buying, in terms of disruption, see that we seem to have institutions that are helpless. We recall that of a polling official that before the poll starts, was even telling that we are going to cast votes here and they are not going to transmit it in the RF portal. So the question is that what the INEC guidelines said? Is that what the Electoral Act said? Who is she taking instruction from?
I mean, I saw that particular video, and that was even before the polling even started. So, I mean, big questions in my mind. First thing I was wondering, don't you have to vote first? I mean, why would you be announcing? You're saying you're polling, all the agents are aware. All the agents are aware.
Just premeditated already.
Big questions as to what exactly, what was that announcement about. But
so these are strong men controlling weak institutions. They weaken our institution. Okay, look at, for instance, now the kind of collation we are having now. All of a sudden, the collation officer will disappear, or they will abduct the collation officer, and after some time they will reappear, just the way we used to have it pre-2007.
And I know that there will be lots of discussions because the kinds of things that we have seen in this election. Some people say, well, they're not surprised. Some people are wondering, come on, I mean, we thought we're past this. But nonetheless, lest good people be overshadowed by all the bad things that has happened. There must, because you, in your opening statement, said that, there's been the positive and there's been the negative. So let's spend a little time on the positives. In spite of its flaws, in spite of its very terrible flaws, there must be positives that we can highlight and say, we would like to see more of this in coming elections. Do you want to highlight a few of them? Yes,
the positive I want us to take away is the retirement of some desperate politicians or some seat-type politicians that sees the seat as their birthright. We've seen sitting governors that were denied entrance to the government retirement home. Most of these governors, the Senate is their retirement home. You superintend 3 senatorial districts and you end up becoming a senator in 1. Very funny system. A state like Enugu State, for instance, the sitting governor was stopped by the Labour Party. Now, another takeaway is that, as I said earlier, people's power rising. People now have that boldness that even despite whatever you are going to bring, we can still go and cast our vote and protect it. Remember, in the presidential election, they brought the surprise of beavers, the RF portal and all that. But this time around, people say, before anything, you must give us assurance that we are going to transmit the results. So people sort of now understand the electoral process better than before. And people know what to expect in terms of this is the stronghold of whoever we are supporting, and we're expecting that the opposition may likely bring violence down there. So they sort of mobilize security. We've seen a scenario where they mobilize security ahead of that. And we've seen a scenario where people protect their mandate to the point of even arresting those thugs and handing them over to the police. So we need to commend the resilience of Nigerians. Despite the way the whole process is skewed, they are still interested in making the whole process to work. So like I said before, all we need to do is to spice or strengthen our institution in such a way that these strong men will not have overbearing influence on
Speaking about commendation, it appears as though there is one coming from this tape, which you will see, but you find out where it goes. Is the EU. Their chief observer, Barry Andrews, did brief journalists concerning what they found with these elections.
Long-term observers still in the field, in some cases still in coalition. Absolutely tragic that 21 people, according to our latest information, lost their lives in election-related violence, and that's really unacceptable, and we want to pass our condolences to the families of those who lost their lives. And again, I would emphasize that if anybody has information relating to these incidents, that they should share it with appropriate legal authorities. And by any standards, When this kind of activity happens in the context of an election, it is almost inevitable that it has the effect of suppressing voter participation. And unfortunately, that is something that was very clearly seen on Saturday, where the high level of violence unfortunately had that effect. And these are standards of voter participation that are central to Nigeria's commitments in its own legislation and the international covenants that it's already signed up to. So we are saddened to share that information with you, but unfortunately that is the reality. There was an improvement in the operation of the technology. We saw not only the operation of the technology, but the overall functioning of the election from the opening of the polling units. Most of our observers noted that the polling units opened on time. Most of them observed that the rules were observed faithfully, but there were some issues, particularly around the secrecy of the casting of ballots, noted by many of our observers in polling units across the states. And this is an area, obviously, for improvement. But the most notable improvement was in the operation of the results viewing platform, where the promise of real-time opportunity to see the uploading of results was fulfilled in most cases. So there certainly was an improvement, but I would also add that there was a much lower turnout, which put less pressure on the electoral infrastructure that was operated on Saturday compared to the presidential. There has been widespread evidence of thuggery and of intimidation and political violence during the course of the elections that took place on Saturday. This doesn't in any way undermine our commitment as a mission to deepening the roots of democracy in Africa. We'll never turn our back on that mission. And we are honoured to be here at the invitation of INEC, with the cooperation of all the authorities, and with the enthusiasm, by the way, of civil society and political participants. We will never turn our back on that mission. We take that very seriously. I did refer in my opening comments to the danger of democratic backsliding, and I think that is something that all of us want to avoid seeing happening. But if we were to simply pull up our tent and walk away, I think that's not something anybody would like to see us do. So we are committed for this, not only for this mission, but for the future, and we will continue to work towards those aims.
All right, so improved functionality of the IREV, attack on journalists, low turnout, some of the highlights of the briefings there. So, Dr. Bu, how does it fit into your impressions of the elections?
It's absolutely my impression, and it's clear. We talk about violence, and he did mention that. We've seen different cases of violence across almost all the states, except a few, I think just a few exceptions. And some of them directed at suppressing votes, or ensuring that votes are cancelled in certain polling units. These are desperate designs. Second, yes, there's an improved IRF, this thing, and the use of beavers. He mentioned that. The other issue he raised, which I also think is very important, and around, look, the attitude of our politicians and how desperation, how people can become desperate to try to manipulate elections using every means possible. So I think there are valid points raised, and I think Iaga also raised that in some of our preliminary observations on the elections, that these are fundamental issues.
Let me ask you, I mean, what is the difference between our elections here and some of the claims where it appears to go, excuse me, smoothly, because politicians usually will be desperate to win elections. So what's the standard, the measurement in terms of what it is that they have gotten right in spite of their desperation, quote unquote, and ours?
I think he raised one issue earlier, which is around the culture of impunity. That, look, you can just do anything and get away with it. Even when the state reacts, and like he mentioned, and some of the arrests were made, they're actually very tentative. They're just made sometimes to create an impression. And after a while, everything just fizzles out, and then the person prepares for another time to do it. The second, for me, is the conversation we're having off camera earlier. It's about our values. Democracy is not simply about institutions. As important as institutions, frameworks are important. They're important, but it's not always about them. It's also about values. There are certain values of democracy that drives things, that makes politicians find it difficult to act in a particular manner. Because one, they have been trained to recognize that this is how things work. And they know that if they do anything in a different manner, the implication can be grave. And that is what we are not getting right. Our conversations on our democracy in this country is always about the normatives. What system, National Assembly, this structure here, create new laws, revise this, and we are not dealing with the fundamentals that have to do with our values. What values do we subscribe to as citizens of this country? What are we promoting? So when you don't have it, when the values of democracy are not there, everything is hollow.
So, Mr. James, in addition to your response to this, let me just add this to you so you respond to this as well. When a doctor speaks about our values, and I do know, I mean, we all witnessed several politicians who came here and spoke to us about, you know, the structure, how they had all of that in the bag before the presidential elections. And many thought, look, what is it that they call structure? People who will go there and distribute, what, money, material things to people. But then we saw how Labour Party, probably NNPP, and some other parties performed without, quote unquote, the structure. I stand corrected though. But so can that question of value, probably in that context, how do they stand side by side?
I think if you look at it critically, you discover that you can't fool people for a very long time. And that is what Nigerians have demonstrated with the, you know, the movement of the third force now. I'll call it movement. That, you know, it's impromptu. And of course, you see a lot of massive alignment towards what they stand for. You know, they came out, they say, we don't give shishi and all that, and people believe that they can, you know, align with their old thing. So, you look at the whole thing critically, you discover that people are now getting tired of empty promises. And people are now recognizing that they are just being used to achieve an end at the end of the day, and they are now willing to change it. So that value system Doctor has just mentioned is what we are looking at here now. So people are now ready to give something a try. Is it possible for us to get this thing without the normal throwing around money? And of course, to a large extent, a lot of people have been removed by the new system.
Okay. So, Dr. Abdul, so when you speak about value, is there any silver lining whatsoever? Because, I mean, some will think, look, that group of people who came forward and said, we don't care about whatever it is you think you had in the bag or the pre-existing structures or whatever, where we believe in what we want to do, and they existed across board. So can we then say, well, yes, there may be a question mark about values, but to what extent, if you factor in these amount of people?
Yeah, yes, it's quite a big issue, and I like that we are having this conversation. To be honest, our democracy has always been a weak one, and therefore it has significant volatility to regression. It can't regress because it is structurally weak, and its basic weakness is associated with those weak values that can sustain the democracy, that will make people to accept certain things, not to accept certain things, to act in a particular manner. So there is no silver lining. There's no just magic word that you can put up. In those days, in the early days of our democracy, that's one of the reasons why we always have this conversation around people talking about nascent democracy in those early days and saying, look, we're just growing, things are not yet okay.
We're no longer nascent?
But I don't actually think in that sense of nascentness, 2 decades. of running a democracy. Of course, comparatively speaking, to others, 200 years, 300 years, 500 years of democracy in other places, it may be nascent. But you see, you are nascent when you actually seen as a child. You are small, but you are making deliberate efforts to take some steps. But in our case is that we are not taking the right steps.
Absolutely.
Even when we do, is one step forward, multiple steps backward. So when people talk about democracy getting reversed in West Africa, they always talk about it in the context of societies or countries where military usurpation of power had taken place. I think that is not valid. I think regression can actually take place without necessarily military taking power. Power can actually be hijacked. You know, by civilians, by politicians.
I heard the EU representative there talking about democratic backsliding. It almost feels like a religion, you know, a faith that you subscribe to. And I'm just looking at some of the other things, you know. We're trying to talk about positives before we went back again to some of the things that have come up. But is it possible for us to, you know, drag the conversation back to some of the things which you're trying to highlight earlier, talking about some of the things you noticed in terms of people power, the resilience of the Nigerian people, in spite of all that was thrown at them. In many instances, we saw results that were predicted, were long predicted, coming, you know, to pass. Let me put it that way. I'm trying to look at, for instance, I'm looking at results generally. I think so far so good. We've seen over about 16 states announced. Let me ask you whether there are any that really stand out for you in terms of perhaps where this people power and resilience of the Nigerian people stand out.
Well, if you look at the voting pattern in most of the states now, it's two ways now. Looking at incumbents trying to come back, and a fresh state where it's a freestyle contest and all that. But where you have the incumbents now, depending on the person's performance and the kind of...
I could help you out. I could reel out the ones that have been announced, and then maybe maybe you can tell me. So, for instance, Oyo, Governor Makinde was re-elected. It doesn't look like there's been a lot of, there's been any hula baloo there.
So that's an incumbent coming back.
Yes. Akwa Ibom is a new man there, Umoeno of the PDP, was re-elected. Ogun. The incumbent was also re-elected in Yobe, incumbent re-elected in Jigawa. There's a new man from the APC elected in that state. Gombe, the PDP retained, the incumbent retained his seat. In Kwara, the incumbent retained his seat. In Katsina, there is a new man at the helm of affairs. He's from the APC as well. In Lagos, the incumbent held his seat. In Sokoto, there's a new man from the APC. Nasarawa, the APC, beg your pardon?
Yes.
Yeah, the APC. In Kano, it's the NNPP. In Bauchi, it's the PDP. The incumbent held his seat. In Ebonyi, a new man there from the APC. And then Plateau, we also heard the PDP is a new party there in power. Delta, PDP, Ebonyi, APC, Cross River, APC. So I don't know, for you, so far so good. It's been a very mixed bag. Which states stand out for you in terms of what you thought will happen?
I don't want to be going into that specific, but we're looking at the margin of lead and the kind of reports we get from these states. You know, those are what the indices we are going to be using or should be using to judge if the whole thing reflects the will of the people. Because we've seen a situation where all of them are thrown into frenzy. You know, the good thing now is that for the first time now, or they are now realizing that they cannot just take people's vote for granted. You know, they started serious campaign. Somebody like Sowolu, for instance, he went to the hairdressing salon, to barbing salon, to...
Well, that was an old picture.
Well, we can see some level of desperation.
Yes,
with it.
But we saw, yes, he went around the number of
Exactly.
places.
So now, if you look at it, you see that most of these places, you check the level of violence that took place there. Then at the end of the day, how the result was collated. Especially the thing we are experiencing during the presidential election is still repeating itself now. results were uploaded, fine, and up till now, results are still being uploaded, and we are still having breaks before election result can be announced and all those things. So you see all those kind of a thing, cannot categorically say that, okay, something is not happening at the background, because that pattern raises suspicion that the collation we are doing now, people need to look at it properly to say, okay, if this really reflects. But that one is left for the politicians to chew at the tribunal. But for me, the mix is fine. It's not business as usual, where a particular political party will sweep the larger part of the country. So that mix is there, which shows that even though you try to manipulate the process, people resisted it to a very large extent. You saw a place like Adamawa, for instance, where we had that they besieged a particular house where polling unit was not taken to a house, and something is happening there. They have to call police and they surround the place and all that. These are people trying to protect their mandate, and they need to be commended. So for me, we can't judge all these things based on this happen or not happen, but how Nigerians are trying to protect their votes and ensure that what they voted happened. Even though you have the power of incumbents and all that, at least for the very first time, when you get there now, whether you stole the mandate or you got it by people's will, you will now start taking development seriously, because people are waiting for you in 2027.
So it's that taking development seriously now, Dr. Abdul, the ownership shown by the people. We talked about the difference in terms of the votes cast for each of these winners. If you look at the numbers, so to speak, it appears there was a drop. There was largely voter apathy. A lot of the voters didn't come out. And you look at the differences between the winner and the first runner-up. It's sometimes quite small. In Ogun State, for instance, is less than 15,000. The difference, I think, less than 15,000 between the two of them. How would this all? What does this say about the ownership of the electoral process by the electorate? I mean, the governorship and the presidential, for instance.
Just to quickly add before I come into this on citizens' resilience, we saw that actually in Kano, where the winning party won with over 1 million votes. That's the highest you have in the country. And then the runner-up came with about 800,000 votes, where citizens came out and took vigil.
1.8 million votes in total?
Yes.
Or even more than that?
Yeah, more than that. More than 1.8 million, almost 1.9 million votes.
Wow.
Yes, that's the highest you have. People took vigil, local government collation centers, state collation centers. No, even when officials are taking a break and order, nobody broke, and people stood there until the result was announced. I think that's one element of people owing and resilience and ensuring that they got the right thing done. As we speak, I think a similar thing is going on in Zamfara at the moment. The result hasn't been announced yet, but you hear the conversation of citizens going out and ensuring that these things are done. So I think there's a problem with I did mention this here during the presidential election, that our voter roll, our register is actually not that correct depiction of our voting population or the real registered people. There is a challenge there. One register is a basket where things can enter but nothing goes out of it. And that's, for me, is a challenge. But again, there is a fundamental problem with these particular elections in terms of voters turnout. One is the rhetorics around the elections even before the presidential elections. A lot of those things have scared people, and particularly threats of violence and counter-threats of violence in certain locations, and people didn't come out to vote. And normally, threat of violence is one of the major things that stop people from coming out. Second is deliberate attempt to suppress vote. And therefore, once you put up mechanisms to do that, we've seen situations where a state governor could actually put up a truck to cut off a road. So all those things happened, and as part of a deliberate process to to suppress vote. You see, in other places, when you want to suppress vote, they have systematic ways of doing it. They do gerrymandering in constituency delineations. You delineate in a manner
they don't beat about the bush.
They don't beat about the
praising
bush.
about it.
So there's a system in doing it in the democracy. They have, but you don't wait on the election day, and that's when you are using some of those things to do. And then for the governorship elections, I think some of the developments that happened in the presidential elections also killed momentum and also discouraged some from coming out to vote. Then secondly is the postponement, even though INEC has no option than to postpone the elections, given that they have challenge in terms of preparing the beavers for the next election. So that again, because Nigerians still go to their villages to register to vote. Mm-hmm. When they go for presidential elections, some we hang around there if there's a distance between where their stations and their village. And then 2 weeks later, they are broke. They want to come back and to start making a living. A lot of them, then you postpone it for one week, they leave. So those things contributed to voters turnout. But again, there is a need for a proper conversations to actually understand, because the best of our elections, we don't even, the last one, we didn't get 40% of voters turnout. That's still poor. So even at the best of our elections, you still have issues in terms of voters turnout. Yes, turnout for vote is a fundamental challenge in many democracies. Hardly do you find a democracy where you can click exactly 50% of voters turnout. It's very difficult. So it's a major, except in countries where it's actually mandatory to vote.
Yeah. You know, we're getting some more reactions to the elections. Yeah. In Lagos, for instance, I mean, you did talk about Lagos, gentlemen. The PDP governorship candidate, Adeniran Abdulaziz, also known as Jandon, says he's not going to take the results sitting still. He says he will see to the end of it. He was talking about voter intimidation and oppression in different parts of the state during the election, which he says happened. And this was actually while he was speaking at an interaction with journalists in Lagos.
I just want to appreciate the people of Lagos for standing firm in the face of oppression and for believing in whatever it is they believe in. We saw everything played out. But in our own case, we want to say that we looked at ourselves and we feel so proud. We feel so proud in the sense that in the face of huge oppression, when we started this project, some people have said, oh, he's deceiving himself. By the time they offer him something now, we will collapse it. We got in between. Somebody, oh, he's a mole in PDP. Somebody sent him to come and do this. It got to a point they were saying all sorts. Even when some respected leaders supposedly had to leave us for crumbs within the ruling party, we stayed behind to say we're going to see this to the last. Even when some decided to say they are going to, from their own parties, to go and form a false alliance somewhere, not even minding the snags in the candidacy. What this we are talking about is going to play out in another process, because we want and spoke about it. We stood our ground to say we are going to see this to fruition. We have not seen the last of it, because yet, yes, a supposed winner has been declared, but like I said, it's a process, it's not an event. So we see this to the end before we then begin to say what decision are we taking as a party. Let me reiterate that we went into this election against all principalities in Lagos State. We ran this election against INEC, we ran against the police, we ran against APC. As a matter of fact, we ran against some of our leaders within the PDP. And we feel so proud that as Lone Rangers, we were able to stand on our feet and put up a good fight for this election. And that was what you found in figures that were getting here and there. And for them to now say that what we polled is 62,000 votes, in Lagos. All of us were just laughing and all that. We've seen how the TPEX, some of our result sheets, where we got 403, the TPEX is 0. They turned into 43. Is everywhere, and something like that, you know, and all of this. But we understand how this is. We've collected enough evidence for us to enter the next process.
All right, so there you have it, the PDP governorship candidate for the just concluded elections on Saturday, talking about his displeasure at what transpired. We'll come to that in a moment, but we'll also have our correspondent, Emperor Simon, who is in Kaduna State. Remember the collation. And Emperor, what's happening now? People still waiting and expecting the results to drop. What's the latest now?
ADP 69 69 APC.
Oh dear. So sometimes this, you know, you're in the heat of these results and everyone just panic, just trying to get what you can. You don't want to miss anything because we won't take it lightly if they miss it over there actually from here. So we'll get back to him. But talking about what transpired in Lagos, the PDP candidates there, did it align with some of the observations you made too? And he says he will go ahead and see it to the end.
Of course, we did point out in our reports the escalated violence in Lagos, no more than what we saw in the presidential election. For instance, we saw a situation where people were prevented from voting, including our observers were even attacked. Some media people were attacked from even covering the whole thing. So this is, as in, if you look at the section 126, 127 to 128 of the Electoral Act, all these offenses are well lined out there. You know, don't obstruct the process. But these people came, you know, in different parts of Lagos, in the Tiosa, in Shomolu and other areas. People were prevented from getting to the polling unit. In some instances, they asked you, if you are not voting for a particular party, will not allow you to vote. In some instances, they will say, okay, you look like a particular tribe, so will not allow you to vote. So, I mean, how bad can it be? But so we are learning what
society.
Pardon?
Did society just sit back and watch these things happen? Because how many of those thugs exist in the population of this country?
Yes, that's what I told you earlier, before now, that at some point now people now started resorting to self-help. Some thugs were killed. If you can remember, some thugs were killed, some were lynched, some were injured, some were made to even confess why they were covering them and all that. So people resorted to self-help. And that's the reason I said that we have strong men controlling weak institutions. Because if you have police and other interagency committee on security that met INEC chairman after the general election telling us, we saw the NSA there saying that we are ready and things are going to be under control, and we are seeing the reverse. Then you ask yourself the question, what option are you leaving for the people except from resorting to self-help? And more often now, those citizens that resort to self-help are the ones that are going to be punished, but the thugs will do their thing and get away with it. So we need to start asking questions and carrying out audit of the performance of different stakeholders in this election. Dr.
Abdul, what would you tell those who are listening to us now just thinking, oh dear, well, they're just on the verge of almost saying, look, why should they have any hope in our next election cycle?
They shouldn't lose hope. I think as a country, it's just for us to continue to learn from these experiences and begin to hold our leaders to account on so many things. It's a difficult context, particularly the way our elections are going lately. But if citizens raise up to that occasions and begin to make the right demands and insisting on certain things, I think we can get it better. People must own this process. I think that's the best we can do. People have to own the process. People have to make the right demand. People have to resist certain things when they see them not going on well. We need to build political parties, to be very honest. We don't have political parties. So you don't. One of the major, I was just saying this to him earlier, key functions of political parties, one is to aggregate interest. interest of its member as is reflected in society. 2 is to educate its people.
The interest of many political parties is just to win elections.
Exactly. So you can, and you can't run elections without political parties. So if you don't have parties that cannot even keep their own membership register, they don't have it.
What if we go for include the independent candidature?
Yeah, if you include the independent candidature, yes, through movement, you can make certain waves and here and there. But you see, it's very important because it gives people choices. I don't have problem with it. I don't have any problem with that because people can make their choice. Anything that we broaden people's choices, for me, I'm for it. But again, it is not simply about that individual. There is just a lot to do with the system that we need to work much more harder, and it has to. It takes a lot of investment in so many things. What kind of investment are we making in our education? What are we teaching our children in school? You have it's only in Nigeria that you run education fully with foreign curriculum. Fully foreign curriculum, and nobody cares. You teach history, medieval history of Europe. And it is fine. And parents pay, including me, a high amount of money to send children to those kinds of schools.
So we're back to the issue of governance. Beyond the election,
there's a lot that we need to do to change this country, to get it better. We need to just put a wedge. We need to stop this reversion that is actually taking place. We need to stop it. And it's not anybody. This is not about government. Could do. It's about citizens.
I think you disagree, but let me just take this as well. CSOs, they had lots of observations, and then they made their observations known to the public as well. So let's bring it this one. They also talked about low turnout, which the EU also did speak about. They talked about, but they also talked about the fact that there was early arrival of election materials for this particular one compared to the previous elections, which they say was not exactly good enough. So here is perspectives from the CDD.
In places like Ekiti, we saw like the SDP asking people to write down their names to be paid later. In Oyo and Ogun, it was the normal traditional APC and PDP, but in Anambra we had ABGA and LP leading the pack really here, with even sharing materials, phones and other souvenir towards enticing voters here in that place. In the South, taking Edo as an example, it was more a case of see and buy, show us evidence, show us proof of your vote before actually being paid. It's being paid, while in the Northwest, the issue of wrapper and credit vouchers being given out was quite rife. And in Taraba, people were waiting to be paid so that they can actually vote itself. So the trend is quite revealing and much more expansive and increased in terms of what we have seen in these elections compared to the February 25th elections itself. In terms of the violence and intimidation, it cuts across all these 6 geopolitical zones, and we just decided to highlight those mentioned by Professor Jinadu, but we have more incidences compared to the presidential elections, with Togri, of course, being one of the very important way people were engaged in this form of violence, the destruction of beavers. There were reports in Okanafo, LG, Akwa Ibom, where talks attack a polling unit just to scare away voters. In Bayelsa, they actually went to polling unit, carted away the beavers and the election materials itself in Hogbia local government. So it varies at every point in time, and it's appearing in different formats than the traditional format.
So those were some more observations concerning the just concluded elections. Well, not all of the results are in, actually. Let's head to Kaduna. We can have Emperor Simon join us now for an update on the results that several other people are expecting. Emperor, what is happening now?
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Chamberlain, and welcome to the liberal state, Kaduna, where, of course, expectations are very high. The citizens are waiting to hear the outcome of Saturday's governorship election here in the state. So far, the results from all the 23 local government areas have been collated. Behind me is a collation center where the last results from the last local government area has just been collated. That's the local government area is Kudan local government area, and the results have been collated. You can see people coming out. What's left now is for the declaration of the winner of the election or the outcome of the election, as a case may be. But what we have noticed is the fact that tensions seem to be very high here in Kaduna State. Earlier in the day, we saw some group of youths who came around the INEC headquarters here, INEC office here in Kaduna State to protest. But for the heavy presence of security personnel, they were warded off, and somehow peace returns to the INEC area. So we're now waiting for the declaration of the results that have so far been collated from the 23 local government areas here in Kaduna State. Chamberlain.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Emperor. So we'll keep in tabs on that one. We're hoping that security agencies will be on hand to douse any tension, just as you had as a gentleman. Expectations from Kaduna. Yeah, you could also look at it perhaps in a larger picture in terms of the contestations, how close, they say state elections are compared to the federal. Any surprises for you?
Well, I don't seem to have any surprise because we are looking at election that is closer to the people now. And the people are aware that whatever decision that came from that is going to affect them directly. So that should explain the reason we have that high level of vigilance. And for me, I think it's a welcome development that people are now realizing that the governorship election is more important to them, because that is where the developmental issues about the particular local government or constituency is going to be decided. So what they are doing is the right things, keeping an eye on the system. But what I found out is having some kind of some security that are apart from police, participating in the whole thing. It's complete contravention of the Electoral Act. The police and other... You
don't think the more the merrier to ensure that security is put in?
Not when you start having vigilantes and other people that are other security outfits that are not state-owned being part of the system, because that could be part of the gimmicks of the politicians to use to scare people and have their way, one way or the other.
Well, it might have its negatives, but in a place like Borno, for instance, where the civilian JTF has been a part of their security architecture, can you dismiss?
Well, as far as the Electoral Act is concerned, they have not been co-opted into election security yet.
Okay, so only the ISIS should have been taken.
The IG was very clear that all self-help group and local security
like Bubagu in Borno State, if not that people had a serious outcry condemning it, they would have played a serious role in the...
That's including the ones that were created by the state government, for instance, the Bubeagos, the Amotek, etc. So they had no role. They should have had no role if they did at all in the elections. Interesting observations, but I'm looking at some of the things that Yaga noted in his preliminary statement. I mean, for it to be this long,
it's for a preliminary statement.
Yes, for a preliminary statement. I'm wondering what the final statement will be like. I mean, you heard Idayat of CDD there talking about vote buying alone, and in many instances that they noticed it. And then look at here, Yaga talks about misconduct at the polling unit, to talk about the deployment of beavers and professional conduct and how security personnel were unprofessional and partisan in some of the polling units that they observed. He also talked about how, in some instances, the beavers was not even used.
Wow. Who would have thought?
Was bypassed. the kind of results that will come from those kinds of places, should they really, even if they're not challenged in court, you know, do you think the INEC has a duty to go through some of these results again, audit the results, maybe not the one on the IREV, but I think they might have their own portal, and see just how it is that some of the results were declared, tampered with in some instances, and even the outcomes? Do you think that there's any role for that? There's
absolutely a role for INEC. If you don't follow process, even at the point of collations, those polling unit results will actually be cancelled. Because the only way, the primary process of conducting this election is accreditation through beavers. Once you don't go through that, it's as good as election did not take place in that polling unit. So to collate that result, that kind of result, is very wrong. It shouldn't have been. And if it has, I think citizens from those constituencies or polling units needs to raise alarm against this. And parties who probably are disadvantaged in this process needs to take this up. To be honest, because they shouldn't have been accepted in the first place. You know, gentlemen, we have spoken about how the dynamics are for state elections. Bauchi, remember, also quite interesting. The results declared not long ago. So our correspondent, Hajar Aliyu, is standing by to also give us an update on the mood in the area, having seen how the results panned out, only just been declared. Hello, Hajara. So tell us, what is the mood at the moment now, having seen the results come through?
Hi, family. People have been celebrating here in both pieces and up until this moment, people are still celebrating, moving from one state to another, celebrating the victory of a re-election. And the governor, when he spoke earlier during his acceptance speech, he said that this is a victory of the people. And then the people have shown that, yes, this is their victory. I spoke to one of the residents earlier, he's a tailor, actually. So I asked him why he was not at his favorite work. And he said that he was going for the victory. He was not going to support his shop today. So I understand people who supported the government election are really happy about this victory. And for him, he understands the importance, or he seems to understand the importance of his performance, because he spoke about unveiling very soon the continuity agenda. So that means he knows that your performance really speaks a lot about what the people would do and the decisions that they make. So people are still celebrating in those.
All right, thank you, Hajar Ali, for your reporting there. So different strokes for different folks in Bauchi, celebratory mood. And gentlemen, you've highlighted some other states that it didn't go quite well. We also heard the PDP candidates in Lagos talking about them seeing it to the end. But we haven't heard anything from, unless we've missed it, from the other candidates in Bauchi as well. Because remember, we were trying to build upon that culture of people reaching out, those who had lost the elections, reaching out to the winner, such that we could at least expand that principle, that culture, which is expected, or they thought will at least to a large extent tone down any narrative, any rhetoric that could be a little more divisive, to ensure the atmosphere is not as toxic as probably in some other areas. So for Bauchi, having listened to that report, what's your impression?
Well, you know, prior to now, the incumbent, you know, was reeling out his achievement and the assurances that he had that he's going to win the election and all that. And you know, just like Doctor said, what we have mostly in this country are power grabbers and not political parties, because they go about this thing without any form of spirit of sportsmanship or even any sense of going there to serve. That explains why you can hardly see any person that lost are coming to congratulate their opponent. Even somebody that is a very, very new party with few supporters and all that will not reach out and say, okay, congratulations. So
even though I think we saw one today, I think Testim Falari, Senator Falari also, I think he must have reached out to
did he congratulate
the Oyo State.
Yes,
I think
So
it was
that's an exception.
That was one of the positives I was hoping we would highlight earlier.
That's an exception.
In Niger as well.
Yeah.
So in
So
Oyo
that's how
State
it's supposed to
and
be.
in Niger,
We
with
remember-
the same day.
Only 2 states so far.
Remember in 2015, Dr. President Goodluck Jonathan, then he congratulated and conceded before the final result was collated. So these are the kind of things we should be having. To lead people or serve people should not be, you should not force yourself on people. Abraham Lincoln, for instance, contested from councillorship to everything for more than 52 times. And the only one he won was the president, the highest office. So we should have that political culture, but because we have a defective system where people go to power, aim to get to power, because that's the only place you can quickly enrich your people, because nobody asks you a question when you get there. When you get there, you have access to the tills. You can fill your pocket as much as possible and shut any person that try to question you down. That's why you see the level of desperation we are having. And until we get to a point that as we put them into power now, we start accountability demand, demanding for accountability from these people, we will not come out from this kind of get in and steal kind of politics that we are playing.
Right, gentlemen, our colleagues in Lagos, Bukola particularly, has got questions for you lot. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Chamberlain. Dr. Abdul, my question is for you, and I just want to briefly follow up on Malpe's pose earlier on about, the pattern of victory and the incumbency factor. What would seem like a departure from that would be some states where we have seen the opposition, displace the incumbents. And I'll just like to mention a few. We're looking at Benue. If it happens in Abia, it should be the same where, an opposition has displaced the incumbent, Kaduna and Kano. So what are the lessons that you perhaps think that we can learn from here as we progress in our democracy?
Okay, I think that's an important question. I don't know about Kaduna. Kaduna result is not out yet, but it is true. Yes, there are ruling parties losing elections to the opposition, and that's quite encouraging. But I think it is not as good as even what we experienced in the past. So far, no sitting governor lost his elections, and in previous experiences, we have seen sitting governors actually losing their election. What did happen this time around is that ruling parties within the state actually lost their attempt to get another person to continue. And those states you mentioned are very good examples. But it still gives us a message that, look, incumbency factors are sometimes exaggerated, and that once people work hard and people are more organized, parties get organized and all that, get the right candidate, and they are not in crisis right from their primaries. And because if we check the trajectories of states where the ruling parties were defeated, you check the trajectory of the opposition, you will find out that probably it's been relatively stable from the primary elections, and they worked really, really hard to actually be able to dislodge the ruling party. And this is what people should be talking about rather than actually exaggerating. I know that, yes, resources are very important. State government deploy a massive amount of resources to have a total hold on the state. They deploy their human resources, they can use anything to remain in power, but once the other side is very organized, very consistent, and try to avoid internal wrangling and crisis, they are able to do well, and that's the examples we have seen in some of those states.
Where the incumbency factor has not been exaggerated, you can find them in a number of other states that were seen as results are being declared, and some of them are Cross River State, for instance. The APC has retained power. Delta, the PDP has retained power. Akwa Ibom, the PDP has also retained power here in these states. And now as we progress, what are the expectations from these states within the context of a new Nigeria? in these states, are we going to be seeing developments, you know, from the peculiarities of these states, you know, the peculiar challenges that the former incumbents have left behind?
Yeah, I think a lot of them probably why you won the elections, or why they won the elections is probably because they sold something different from what people are used to seeing. A lot of them capitalized on some of the failures of the incumbent, and therefore worked really hard, presented a different image, and created, you know, captured the imaginations of the people. So it's not left for the party or the governors elected to now follow through with their commitment and the promises they make to citizens. But they will also have to recognize that if they can defeat a ruling party, because probably the ruling party did not do well enough, it also means that they can also be defeated in the subsequent elections if they don't also do well. And citizens also have to learn to make demands and hold those governments to account in terms of what they promised to do. Because you don't elect a new party or new leadership and still allow them to run the same way the previous governments actually ran the state. So I think it's a collective one, both on the side of the government and on the side of the citizens, recognizing that things have to change. But if they don't change, it's only another 4 years, and citizens will also be out again to take the right action.
Dr. Abdul, allow me to follow through on that question, but slightly in a different direction. And that is to ask you about some of the positives that have come out of this election cycle. We have heard so many people describe it in perhaps not so complimentary terms, but there have been some positive outcomes, if you like. What were those positive outcomes, given the background from where we're coming, and how do we leverage on those outcomes going forward?
Yeah, one of the positive is what had just been mentioned earlier, that from ruling parties lost the elections in the state. It's a positive. It shows that, look, even with all the resources available to you because you control the state government, that you could actually lose an elections. And that, for me, is a very important positive. We have also seen people who have had a strong traditional hold on certain positions actually losing elections. And one interesting one that I read earlier today was the one that happened in Yobe State, where I understand the Speaker of the State House of Assembly lost his elections to a 25-year-old young man who probably was 5 years old when the Speaker got first elected. And he defeated the Speaker. And that's, for me, also a very encouraging one. There's another case, I understand, in Kwara, where a 26-year-old girl, also a lady who actually also won elections into the State House of Assembly. I think there's a few pockets of encouraging things that we have seen. We've also seen situations where citizens came out in their mass, people who refused to actually go back home even after elections, following the result from their polling unit through their wards to local government and even to the state collation centers, and staying vigil to ensure that the right results are announced. And that did happen, and they are all very happy about it. I think these are positive take-homes that we can see. We've also heard about two candidates who actually congratulated the winners. We just got an example of Oyo State and the example of Niger State, where those who lost the election called to say congratulations to the winners. I think those are some of those encouraging things that have come up despite the depth of the challenges that these elections has had.
Mr. James Ugochukwu, let me come to you and follow through with what I just spoke to Dr. Abdul about. And let's talk about the beavers and the role they have played in some of the salutary things that Dr. Abdul just talked about in terms of ensuring that only voters were allowed to vote this time the proper accreditation process, not being able to jimmy the system, if you like, which meant that those who wanted to disrupt things had to cut away the beavers, sometimes even before the elections took place, had to collect the beavers physically and run away with them rather than attempt to, infiltrate the polling units and tamper with the ballot boxes and all of that. Have we been a bit too hard on the introduction of the beavers, particularly with what happened during the presidential election and what has now happened with the governorship and state assembly elections?
The beavers, no doubt, is a game changer, and look at the way it was used in off-cycle election before now. Looking at Ondo, Ekiti, Osun, FCT, and of course Anambra and all that, you discover that it made it impossible for manipulation to happen at the polling units. And of course, the desperate politicians are monitoring all this closely. And what do they resort to? To be snatching the beavers, since the beavers is the obstacle between them and what they want to gain. So whether we like it or not, I think beavers is a game changer and it should be welcomed. If anything is wrong with the beavers, it's the people handling it or the people that wants to prevent it from being used. But it's a game changer, and I can tell you that it's even the introduction of beavers that embolden a lot of people to want to participate in the election, especially during the presidential election. But what do we have then? We now see a situation, just as you mentioned, those coming to snatch the beavers, knowing that when they do that, the process will be disrupted for some time. Or after the beavers has done its work, they will prevent the beavers being used to transmit the result to the IRF portal. So it's a game changer, and what we need to do is to ensure that the use in subsequent time needs to be protected from all this kind of desperate politicians that uses thugs and all their desperate allies to, disrupt the process. Nothing is wrong with the beavers if it's put into use the way it's supposed to be. And of course, the other things that I must say is a little challenge is when the beavers is failing in the accreditation. Like what we observe in the situation room, we discover that the beavers accredit more through facial recognition than thumbprint, and the turnaround time is less than 1 minute, which makes the process a bit faster than what it used to be. And in few cases, that's when you see it not even functioning. Even at that, INEC have their rack tech that brings backup or troubleshoot the issue in less than no time. So beavers is something that we need to encourage in the process of election management, and try everything possible to protect it as we are going on into other election as it is. For instance, we've seen a situation where the thugs invade polling units trying to snatch the beavers, and the people will demobilize the thug and get the beavers back. So the technology is here, and of course it's something that needs to be encouraged.
Now, in the civil society room, going forward, because quite a number of people had pointed out in the past that, look, we seem to be trying to walk much faster than we should be trying to walk, and introducing these things incrementally. And that brings to mind the issue that then follows this election. Many people point out that the next election is in 4 years' time. But then that's not correct. We have elections, off-cycle elections coming up, much later on in the course of this year and early next year in the likes of Bayelsa State and a couple of others. They are coming up, Imo and so on. What should INEC be doing between now and then, to perfect this system and to ensure that in those off-cycle elections, things are a lot more seamless than they were during this election cycle?
I think the challenge before INEC is that of improving their logistics and preparation ahead of the election. For instance, we have instances where most of the ad hoc staff deployed to use these beavers don't know how to use it properly. So ahead of this election, I think INEC should step up their preparation and ensure that these ad hoc staff are adequately trained on how to use this technology. The technology doesn't have any problem. And if these hazard staff are trained very well, we won't have any issues. Remember in Ondo, Osun, and Ekiti, what emboldened us to now say that, yes, we now have a game changer was because the beavers was seamlessly and flawlessly used in the voting and accreditation process. Then during the collation and the transmission of results, in a record time of 8 hours, about 90% of the results are already been uploaded in the RF portal. So these are things that I need to go and understudy what they did then and, recopy it again and deploy it for the next election, the off-cycle election, because the off-cycle election timetable, we are going to have Kogi, Bayelsa, and Imo State on the same day. So the preparations should start now, immediately after this election, preparing their people ahead of that place. If Beaver doesn't have any problem, the issue is the kind of people manning it, and of course the attack that is being subjected to by the politicians. And this is where the security ISS now need to come into play, protecting both people handling the beavers and the beavers itself. Beavers is configured in such a way that even if you steal it here, you cannot take it to any polling units to use anything to manipulate. The other challenge we have is where we have community conspiracy, where they will decide to jettison the beavers and be using other means to, proceed with the election process. And this is where INEC need to wedge this power of cancelling such kind of polling unit after results emanate from such places.
Indeed, Mr. Ugochukwu, the beavers has been touted to be the game changer in our electoral process, and some have cited its ability to detect over voting in the case of Osun election. But if we could just take a little more time to reflect on the beavers, if the presidential election is anything to go by, perhaps it may not be safe to say, but one can infer that perhaps it's not fail-safe, regarding the delay in the uploading of results to the IRF portal. And I also noted that you said earlier on that the beavers has actually encouraged many more to come out and vote. But that may not be true in its entirety. If we look at, past elections, in 2019, for instance, we had more voter turnout, 27.3 million to be precise. But in the last presidential election, what we had was 24 million. Even in the days where the elections were, bedeviled by the most challenges of ballot box snatching and serious cases of rigging, we had a record 69% of voter turnout in the past. So perhaps the beavers has not necessarily encouraged more persons to turn out and vote, and perhaps it's not entirely, the deployment of technology has not entirely guaranteed the integrity of our electoral process as we expect it to. So where does that leave us?
If you recall your mind back to the incident during the presidential election, you can recall that at some point in most of the polling units, INEC men and material did not arrive on time. And what does that leave you with? I come out to vote by 8:30, or I was told that the election is going to start by 8:30, and I wasted about 4 hours of my life waiting to cast the vote, and nothing is happening. I will simply go back to my house because voting is not compulsory in this part of the world. And of course, when the voting started, the whole thing prolonged to the next day. People were voting as at 3 a.m., 6 a.m. and all that. So what did that tell you? A lot of people might have gone home because of that. At the end of the day, you now see the semblance of what looks like low voter turnout. Not to talk of a situation where people were expecting violence or voter intimidation and something of that nature. We had a case in Lagos where some people were turned back from polling unit that they should not, they are not permitted to vote if they are not going to vote for a political party, or if they are from a particular tribe or something like that. So all those are things, if you accumulate all these numbers of people and add it to the people that turn out, I think you'll see that to a large extent you cannot dismiss entirely that people are not emboldened to come out to vote as a result of the introduction of new technology. and all that. And of course, during the collation of the result, we saw what happened. Yes, people were not be able to upload result to the RF portal, but at that particular point where they can't upload presidential results, they are uploading the National Assembly result. So what does that tell you? So is that there is incompetence in the part of INEC ICT team, or a direct sabotage to make that not to work? So this is something they've used in Ondo, they use it in Oshun, they use it in Ekiti. I've never had that problem. As I told you before, in a record time of 8-10 hours, 98% of the result has been uploaded in the RF portal. So the question is, what went wrong? If you are looking at the volume of the result that we're expecting to be uploaded, we expect the ICT team to expand the bandwidth of the server that is going to receive such information to unlimited bandwidth. Is done there. So there's no explainable reason why that should happen. And people now hoping on technology and seeing that is enough reason for them to be worried and assume that this technology is not working. So we need to start reorientating people that this technology has come to stay, and we should look at what went wrong that made it not to work the way it worked before. If it's a technology that we are just bringing for the first time and we are seeing these challenges, we now say, okay, it's not working, but it has worked before. It has worked in other off-cycle election, and it worked perfectly well. So the question is it that INEC don't have the capacity to handle a larger election on a particular day, or is it that they lack the willpower to do the right thing? So these are the questions we need to be carrying out as
we're keeping an eye on quite a number of things.
Worked very well.
Mr. Ogochukwu, we're keeping our eye on a number of things. Earlier on, we're showing you live pictures from the Kaduna Collation Center, where we are expecting an announcement any moment from now. There you have those live pictures from Kaduna. But in the meantime, we also have news that the National Human Rights Commission, the NHRC, says it would invite the governor of Kogi State, Yaya Bello, and the chairman of the Lagos State Parks Management Committee, Mr. Musliu Akinsoya, also known as MC Oluomo, and hundreds of others for questioning over incidences of hate speech, electoral violence, obstruction of voters, and other infractions reported against them in the course of the presidential, National Assembly, governorship, and state houses of assembly elections.
You see these issues that are burning us now, his statement by the Luomo, the one by the governor of Kogi State, and other people. Don't allow it to rest. Make sure either you make it a news issue or an editorial or some, let it not be swept under the carpet. Because, our society cannot go on like this. Why these things thrive is that before the next 1 week now, we'll start talking of a different thing. Nobody will remember those ones again. And these people will be going about occupying front row in the public space and so on and so forth. Let us make them very, very uncomfortable by having a constant reminder on this ignominiable role they have played, so that in the committee of right-thinking members, they will feel odd. They will feel odd, because I can imagine if any of them comes out any day and the headline of the newspaper that day is dwelling on the ignominible role the person has played. So we should not allow these things to be swept under the carpet. We will invite him for questioning, because the statement is worrisome. Even though I listened to the Commissioner of Police in Lagos State yesterday, he said they are investigating it, but that will not stop the Commission from carrying out its own mandate.
All right, there, Mr. Tony Ojukwu, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, the Chairman of the National Human Rights Commission, there, talking about the fact that the Commission does intend to invite a couple of notable Nigerians over the roles they played within the presidential, National Assembly, and then, of course, governorship and state houses of assembly elections in Nigeria just a couple of days ago and the one that took place 3 weeks ago. So perhaps I should come to you, Dr. Abdu, and ask what do you make of that statement coming from the National Human Rights Commission? Is it a salutary statement? What powers does the NHRC have? Should they, in fact, as its chairman said, get these people to come and answer questions? Can you, for example, get a governor to come and answer questions while he is under immunity?
Anyway, I honestly don't have an insight on some of those powers, but I knew that the National Human Rights Commission is a very important human rights institutions that we have in this country. If Tony is able to take this through, it will be quite unprecedented. We've never experienced this kind of things before, and for me, if they're able to take it through, it will be a welcome development. But I know there are a lot of challenges. I think, yes, of course, governors are immune from criminal prosecutions, but they are actually not immune from investigation. Probably what the commission will be doing is engaging them and as well investigating. But again, on the prosecutorial side of it is what I'm not too sure. I think I haven't gone through the statute to understand the details around that, and therefore I leave that to them. But I think engaging in this conversation itself by the commission is encouraging. That it's important that people know that when they make certain statements or they took certain actions, that certain action can be taken against them irrespective of their position or their status within the society. So I think taking this up itself may be one of those encouraging things that will be coming up from these elections, and let's see how far they can go with it.
But then, just as a quick follow-up before I let my colleague Bukola come in at this point, I want to find out from you, Dr. Abdul, many of these comments were made by a whole lot of people. Of course, there are some more prominent than others. But right now, the electoral process, of course, is still ongoing in many states and hasn't been concluded. You've talked about the salutary impact that the conversation can have. But then, of course, within our context in Nigeria, I believe it was either you or Mr. Ogochukwu who pointed out earlier that we don't have a history of successfully prosecuting people in positions of power. Even after they've left power, we don't have that history. We don't have the antecedents. So how much should we invest in this in terms of expectations?
Yeah, I think we need to tame the level of impunity that follows our elections, and therefore is something we may probably need to take very seriously. I was the one that mentioned this earlier, that many times people just get away with it. Of course, we have seen situations where the Independent Electoral Commission is actually able to prosecute some of its own staffs who have committed some misdemeanor in the electoral process and those people have been convicted. So there are minimal, a few cases here and there, but I think in the whole, we're actually not doing well in actually dealing with people who in one way or the other try to undermine our election. And it's part of the reason why some people are demanding that we should have a special court on election-related crimes, and so that people can be prosecuted as they go, and almost like an ad hoc court arrangement. I think that's the kind of arrangement you have in Kenya, where electoral offenses are dealt with quite quickly almost during that election period. So you have courts that have been instituted to deal with those electoral offenses. And I think if we do that, we will probably be able to manage this culture of impunity. Because if someone does this kind of thing and just get away with it, next time another person will do it. And before we know it, our elections will become, our electoral process will actually become very difficult to manage. And that's part of what we are struggling with at the moment.
Just before I follow up on that, there are quite a number of things we're following up on, as Ladi has said earlier on, and one of which is this, which has just come in. the Adamawa governorship election, the result has been declared. Well, the result has not been declared for that. The election has been declared inconclusive due to the margin of lead. APC was able to secure 390,275. That's the female governorship candidate, Mrs. Aisha Binani. And the PDP candidate scored 421,524 votes. So because of the margin of lead, the election has been declared inconclusive. I'm very confident that INEC will be briefing on this shortly. There's another result from Borno. The APC governorship candidate and incumbent, Professor Babagana Zulum, has been declared the winner of the election. He scored 545,542 votes to defeat the PDP governorship candidate, Mohammed Jajari, who polled 82,147 votes. So there you have it. More results will come in from this point as we continue to keep our eyes on this process for you. Following up on that, and this is for you, Mr. Ugochukwu, what we do have a history of in this country is, the exploitation of our fault lines, by politicians, and we can refer to the elections in the 60s and in the 70s. But with the exception of the June 12, 1993 election, where it would seem that Nigerians were united in one voice, voting for one candidate, regardless of where they're from, be them from the south or from the north. Have we missed an opportunity in 2023 to repeat the June 12 experience? And if we have not, what can we begin to do to correct that? Or should we give up and accept that we are, tribal people and ethnic people? How can we move from this point to political maturity?
Indeed, Mr. Ugochukwu, I hope you got that question from Buki, because I want you to think about it. We're going to take a very quick break at the moment, and then when we come back, we'll come straight to you for the answer to that question. So please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. A warm welcome back as we continue our coverage of the 2023 verdict, the state elections this time. And before we took that break, Bukola had asked Mr. Ugochukwu a question. Mr. Ugochukwu, I did promise that you could use the opportunity to digest the question and now give us your answer. So this is now the opportunity.
Okay. I think we are increasingly having political intolerance in the country. As in the 50s, Umar Atine was elected as the mayor of Enugu, a Fulani trader. I used to go there. The same thing in the southwest and all that. We are now having a situation whereby the desperate and rogue politicians, they only remember to tell us where we come from during election. And in clear violation of Section 92A of the Electoral Act, they incite people to violence. They come up with some kind of abusive languages and campaign slogan that is targeted to the sentimentality of a particular tribe or a particular ethnic group and all that. And for me, if you look at it holistically, it's widespread nationwide. For instance, in Lagos State, there's these clashes between who owns Lagos or who doesn't own Lagos, burning of businesses, burning of properties and all that. And if you come to even the Eastern Heartland, you see a particular stronghold using the same tactics. I call this one now the dagger of Brutus, your own brother attacking you because of election and all that. And you go to other part of the country, the same thing. So it's a question of we, Nigeria, not allowing the politicians to romanticize our emotion during election. Because at the end of the day, after all said and done, after we swear them in to the power and all that, if we don't hold them accountable, we'll still go to the same market, we'll still go to the same worship in the same place, go to the same school and all that. And of course, if you are traveling, you won't be asking which tribe does this person come from before you board the vehicle. Or which tribe does your auto mechanic come from before you can fix your vehicle and all that. At the end of the day, you are looking for the most competent person. So it's a healing process that we need to embark on after the election. Because a lot of things has been bruised, a lot of feelings has been bruised, a lot of business has been destroyed, a lot of life has been taken as a result of the violence, incitement, and rhetorics of some people. In fact, they are so bold enough that they don't have any modicum of shame in coming out openly to say that you should not vote for a particular tribe, or you should not vote for a particular party, or if a particular tribe, you should not come here to vote. And of course, what National Human Rights Commission is attempting to do is, is commendable. These people need to be called to action. They need to be called to order. They cannot go ahead and be inciting people against themselves.
I have to apologize that I'm interrupting you. I have to apologize that I'm interrupting you because we have to go live quickly to Katsina, where the governor-elect of Katsina State, Diko Rada, who was announced winner of the governorship election in that state, is joining us now. Congratulations, Dr. Rada, on your victory. How has it been since that announcement was made? Dr. Rada, if you can hear me, I said congratulations on your victory. What has been the experience like since you were elected? All right, Mr. Ogochukwu, we seem to be having a bit of an issue with Dr. Rada's audio. So let me come back to you to finish your thoughts, please.
Okay, so it's a healing process that we need to embark on quickly as we are done with the election. Because if you look at Lagos State, for instance, it's a cosmopolitan city. And it's not right for somebody to come and say that somebody is not part of Lagos. Some people were born, their grandparents were born in Lagos, and apart from the prefixes or suffix that is in their name, they don't know any other place than Lagos. So I think that healing process needs to start immediately after the election. And of course, the only way we can do this is to ensure that these people that incited and instigated people and are masterminds of all this violence need to be called to order and disciplined in line with Section 92 of the Electoral Act 2022. Whichever party that gets to power, even if they benefited from such, they should use such people as a scapegoat. Because prior to the election, most of these, in fact, all the political parties and candidates, they signed the peace accord and they pledged to maintain peace during the election. So if the people that are supporting you did otherwise, I think you should ensure that you punish them no matter how highly placed. Because if we don't do that, this is a precursor to election violence in 2027, because they will say that we did it in 2023 and nothing happened. And that is why you see that international bodies are rating us as a hybrid democracy, where it's not a full democracy and it's not a full authoritarian system. Kenya and Ghana and the like have already overtaken us in terms of democratic indices. You check the map that international democracy and election assistance puts up, so that Nigeria is not a democracy yet. Kenya, that used to have incidents of election violence, have already overtaken us. They are green. Ghana is green. Rwanda is green. Most African nations are agreeing, but the so-called giant of Africa is still practicing this kind of primitive system of leadership recruitment. So the only way we can stop this is to ensure that these people that did cause all this mayhem are dealt with. These people that incited one tribe against the other are dealt with. Because after this election, we'll still go back. Nigerians have intermarried and mixed up to the point that you cannot come and be bringing tribal and ethnic division in whatever guide.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Ugochukwu. Let me allow Dr. Abdul have the final word on this segment. Going forward, Dr. Abdul, very briefly, if you will, what do you expect to see now, even as we conclude the process? What are the things you expect to see very quickly?
Yeah, I actually expect to see states that are actually able to conclude their elections, and if there are no major contentions around the elections, that those who lost are quickly able to congratulate the winners. And if they are contention and they have strong feeling that they are not okay with the result, to actually put up everything together and actually proceed to the court. Despite the imperfections of the system, we actually don't have any alternative. There is just nothing else we can do than to actually use those instrumentality of the court to seek redress. And I think that's what we should do. People should also be careful, be magnanimous in your victory when you are there. Yes, losing election can be very frustrating. It's also to manage our frustrations and ensure that we don't do anything that will further heighten the already difficult situation that we are in as a country. I think it's for us to recognize that this is the only country we have. It will take our collective effort to actually make it better. It's not perfect. It is not okay. We are not happy with some of the development, but we have to work collectively together to get these things to work better for us now and for us in future.
That's a good point to anchor it. Dr. Hussaini Abdul, Chairman of the Board of Yaga Africa and Election Results Analysis Dashboard Analyst, thank you so much for your time on the program this evening. Same goes to Mr. James Ugochukwu, co-convener, Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room. Thank you both for your time on the program this evening.
Thank you.
So do we have the Governor-elect of Katsina State back with us?
Yes, well, yes, Dr. Adiko Rada, Governor-elect of Katsina State. I hope the audio is better. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How are you?
Fine, thank you, and congratulations on your victory. Let me begin by asking you what would be the very first thing? What would be the very first thing you intend to do now that you have emerged victorious? What's the very first thing you intend to do with particular reference to the outcome of this election?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the people of Katsina State for giving me the mandate. And first thing I would like to do is to extend my hand of fellowship to the opponent so that they can come on board if they have anything to contribute for the development of Katsina State. The politics is over, and we are looking for cooperation from each and every member of the state so that we can be able to move the state forward. That is my expectation, and that is what I intend to do immediately.
As you prepare to assume the mantle of leadership in Katsina, you must have identified, I believe, some of the key critical challenges that you will be facing. And one of them, by those of us who are of Katsina but who have been following events in Katsina, would be the issues of surrounding security. What are your thoughts on that, and perhaps have you come up with some kind of roadmap towards beginning to even look at those challenges, particularly that one?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we put security as first priority in our strategic policy, because without security, you can't be able to go to school, to hospital, to market, so it will affect every segment of the society. and we intend to give priority to security. How do we do that? We intend to do it by involving the locals, gathering local intelligence, trying to recruit people from the communities and train them, provide all the necessary apparatus they may need, link them up with the conventional security that we have, police and its military, so that together they can protect those communities. Because given the number of the security that we have, police and the military, they will not be able to man all our villages. So we need to involve those locals. We need to give them all the necessary support they needed, and also try to use technology to tackle the insecurity.
Let's look at other things, shall we? Katsina is also having issues with its educational sector, particularly things like girl-child education and the number of out-of-school children. What are your plans in that regard?
I think it is important also to look at, because I was a teacher, I have taught for over 10 years, so I knew the problem of education. Major thing that we need to do is to make sure that every child goes to school. After getting all the child to go to school, we should make sure that we train and retrain our teachers so that we have the quality impact of the knowledge they are giving to the children, because without having a proper person to teach the children, you will not be able to have the quality of education needed so that you will produce children that can stand the test of time and be able to catch up when they go to the universities
Dr.
and tertiary institutions. So education is what...
I will thank you. I will thank you. Please go on. Please go on. Please go on.
Yes.
Dr. Rada, you can land on that point before I come in.
You said what?
Go ahead and conclude your points before I come in.
Oh, okay. I think education, as I mentioned, is one of the priority, and then we have to give special consideration to the people of to the children of the poor, because me and you have opportunity to take our children to the institutions and pay money to the private schools, but we must make sure that the public schools are on proper ground, public schools are being managed properly, people who go to school, teachers go to school on time, do their lesson plans, impact on the children morally and otherwise, and to give effective supervision to the schools, because what we are lacking now is proper management of the school system. And also, we are establishing a universal management system of the school so that we will have biometrics of all the children enrolled into schools and make sure that we provide what it takes to get a quality education on our children.
Dr. Rada, one of the other things that we could talk about when it comes to Katsina is known for cotton, but over past administrations, this has not really been harmonized, to encourage subsistence farming, and even on an industrial scale in Katsina State. If we tie that to the double-digit unemployment rate, I wonder what your thoughts and plans are for the people of Katsina in this regard.
I quite understand the fact that Katsina State is an agrarian state, and Katsina State has about 85% of their population engaged in agriculture. And also you should understand that I am a student of agriculture. I had my PhD on agricultural extension and rural sociology. So what we intend to do is to bring about what was done before. In every village, we used to have extension staff. This extension staff were responsible for providing farmers with best practices on how to improve their production, how to take care of the land tenure system in their localities. So the only way you can do that is by improving the productivity on a smaller land. That is sustainable subsistence farming. And by doing that, you are engaging all the farmers, trying to provide the necessary farming practices to the farmers. After providing farming practices to the farmers, getting that knowledge acquired by the farmers, and then you try to provide all the input they may need and also effective supervision, and then try to see what value they can add to the product. That is, after harvesting their product, if they will be able to add value to that product so that they will maximize their profit and improve on their living standard. So agriculture is my first priority, and I'm going to do everything so that we can create a lot of employment and also engage our youth into irrigation farming so that they will have all year round producing, and it will reduce redundancy level. And when it reduces redundancy level, it reduces the rate of criminality in our society. Once everybody can have something to spend, have something to eat, they will not be having negative minds that will affect and increase criminality in our society. So we intend to engage our farmers all year round by irrigation farming, providing all the necessary inputs, and then reviving the extension services to the farmers so that extension services could liaise and serve as a liaison between the farmers and the research institutions. So anything new that will improve the productivity of the farmers will be sent through the extension agents, and anything the farmers have a problem, either insecticide or what have you, they will quickly channel it through the research institution, and there will be that liaison between the research institution and farmers, and the extension staff will be the middlemen in that respect.
Dr. Rada, I'm sure the people of Katsina State have high hopes, following your election victory, and you have, clear plans about how to go about your objectives for them. This is why I want us to talk about timelines now. What time frame are you looking at within which you can achieve all of these things that you have laid out for the people of Katsina?
This is major thing that affects politicians. When they get elected into office, they start telling people that in 1 month I'll provide this and that, in 2 months I'll provide this and that. What I'm assuring the people of Katsina State, I will follow my strategic policy. I will try to implement it from day one, and I will make sure that there is transparency and accountability in all aspects of government, and we ensure that there is rule of law. Nobody is above any law. Nobody, no matter how high he is, that will not be able to address. And then there is our laws will not only be to the lower people. We try to do justice to all, and we try to ensure that we implement all what we have promised people. And people should follow us on that, and people should ask us questions, because we don't have to give time. But I'm telling you, from day one, we'll make sure that we kickstart the process of developing Katsina to the highest level we are expecting Katsina to be.
Dr. Diko, rather one group of people who will be looking forward to what you do for them in that area will be small and medium enterprises, because I know that you were immediate past Director General of SMEDA, and that's the Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency of Nigeria. But for now, let us just say thank you very much. Once again, congratulations, and we wish you the very best of luck as you prepare to govern Katsina State. Thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure to have you again. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. So we'll take a break at this point, having spoken to Dr. Diko Rada, Governor-elect of Katsina State. We'll take a break. The 2023 verdict, state elections, continues after this.